This video is a step-by-step guide to sewing your Labubu Puffer Jacket. Now let's gather our tools. You'll need a standard Teflon presser foot and an invisible zipper foot for sewing the elastic piping. A narrow zipper foot and a roller foot are optional, but can be very helpful, though your standard Teflon foot will work just fine if you don't have them. Remember, if you're using a home sewing machine, just find your machine's equivalent feet. For your hand tools, you will need 1mm elastic, a pair of sewing nippers, fabric shears, and some chalk for marking. Let's sew our main body panel. It's made of 3 sections, front, back, and front again. Place the panels with their glossy right sides together. Line them up under your presser foot with a 5mm seam allowance. A good tip is to position the fabric so it's just covering the machine's feed dogs. This helps prevent any slipping. Once it's secure, gently line up the top and bottom edges evenly as you sew. To keep your seam allowance straight, just guide each section parallel to the metal plate guide on your machine. This simple technique makes the whole construction process smooth and easy. Now press the seam flat to ensure top and bottom panels are aligned at the armholes. This alignment will be important when we sew the sleeves to the armholes later in this tutorial. Alright, now that we've pressed our panels, it's time to add the elastic cord. First, take your length of elastic and carefully place it between the 2 panel layers. Keep your elastic spool on a rod or a spindle. It allows the cord to feed off the spool smoothly and evenly. Next, let's set up the presser foot. We'll be using our invisible zipper foot for this. Position your fabric so that the elastic sits neatly inside the left channel on the bottom of the foot. This will help guide the elastic and hold it securely in place. As you begin to sew, your main job is to keep the elastic snug against the seam, while also making sure the top and bottom fabric panels stay aligned. Go slowly here. You're not just sewing a seam, you're creating a neat, enclosed channel for the elastic. Guide the fabric and the elastic together all the way to the end of the panel. Once you're comfortable with this process, you can actually fold multiple panels around a single, long piece of elastic and sew them continuously, one after the other. It's a fantastic time saver for production work, and it creates a beautifully consistent result. We'll actually be using this exact method when we sew the sleeve in our very next step. Applying elastic to the sleeve hem is very similar to the body hem we just did. So, wrap the sleeves around the elastic. Secure it under your invisible zipper foot using that handy channel to guide the elastic, and sew your edge stitch. Now here's the efficiency technique. Instead of stopping to cut the elastic after each sleeve, just keep going. You'll see me continuously wrapping and sewing one sleeve after another, feeding them right off the same long piece of elastic. We only cut the elastic from the main spool once we've finished a whole batch. For each individual sleeve, remember to leave a small tail of elastic at both the beginning and the end before you cut it free from the chain. This brilliant time-saving technique is called chain stitching, and it's a fundamental method for dramatically improving your sewing speed and workflow. Now that our elastic channels are done, let's focus on the yoke. Start by trimming the bottom of your front yoke panel and inserting the yoke filling. The batting should feel loose and comfortable inside. Don't pack it in tightly. Next, let's secure our slippery fabric. Slide the front body panel filling between the 2 layers you sewed earlier. Use the notches as your guide, placing the filling about 1/4 inch from the center front. Place the yoke and body panel with their right sides together. Sew them with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now for the key step. Be careful not to catch the filling in the seam, as that creates bulk, nor sew over the yoke logo, and be sure to keep the armhole layers aligned as you finish. Go slowly here. Once that's done, simply repeat the exact same process for the back body panel and the other front panel. Here's a tip. You can chain stitch the panels by bringing one panel closer to the previous as you stitch. You can just trim the connecting thread afterwards. Although I am using a rolling foot, you can do this with a standard Teflon foot. And congratulations! You've just mastered 3 of the most difficult operations in one go. Now it's time to quilt the body. Stitch across the front body, starting at the notch, shown earlier, to the bottom of the armhole. Then continue across the back and from armhole to notch on the opposite front panel. Stitching should be parallel to the hem and roughly 3/4 of an inch from the edge. Let's attach the sleeves. Start at the front armhole, lining up the sleeve notch with the top. Sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance down to the bottom notch, which is the sleeve's midpoint. Be sure to guide the fabric carefully so you don't pull the elastic out of its channel. Stop at the midpoint notch with your needle down in the fabric, lift the presser foot and pivot the piece around. Now, continue sewing from that midpoint up to the top of the back armhole, ending at the back notch. You should now have a small seam allowance between 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch, extending beyond the front and back armholes. And it's also precisely where we'll sew the collar on later. Here, I am performing the same operation but for the other sleeve, this time with a Teflon foot, starting from the back armhole edge and ending at the front armhole top edge. Here is a better look at the sleeve midpoint notch as mentioned before. Once your needle meets the midpoint notch, turn the piece and stitch back up the front armhole. Again, leaving 1/8 to 1/16 seam allowance for the collar. Congratulations, you attached the sleeves to the body. Here is how the sleeves should look after you've attached them. Next we insert the filling and close the shoulder seams. The sleeve filling has 2 pieces, front and back. The front is indicated by the notch you see here. Now place it inside the front sleeve with the flat edge against the elastic. Here I mistakenly attempt to place it inside the wrong way, flat side toward armhole. Realizing this, I flip it to face the correct direction. Using your tweezers, gently push the filling until it touches the bottom of the sleeve, leaving an 1/8 inch space at the shoulder seam. Compared to the yoke filling you worked on earlier, the sleeve filling will feel more compact. Now do the same for the back sleeve. Great! Now that the filling is in place, it is time to close the shoulder seam. Holding the shoulder seam with your tweezers, pull the armhole seam allowance away from the sleeve. Now place underfoot at 1/8 seam allowance and drop the needle at the corner where you pulled away the seam allowance. With the needle in the down position, I am able to make slight adjustments to the seam. Now grab top and bottom elastic tails and gently pull 1 cm to create tension, and sew, securing the elastic with 2 to 3 back stitches. Before I trim the elastic, I check the construction because the elastic can come undone if it isn't secured properly. As you can see, the back and front sleeve match. Here I add the extra back stitching. However, you can do this at the end of each shoulder seam you sew. Finish by trimming the elastic, but leave a 3 to 4 mm tail. Now that you've completed the first sleeve, the second one will be a breeze. Tip! When you hold the filling with your tweezers, grab the whole piece down to the tapered end. This will make inserting the filling much easier. Just like the previous sleeve, start by pushing the seam allowance away from the sleeve and drop the needle in the corner. Remember, when you sew for production, chain stitch each shoulder, seam back to back, and you will be able to sew many of them quickly. Congratulations, you've made it halfway through this course. Now it's time to construct the collar. Start by folding the collar in half and place the filling inside. To make this easier, you can pre-press the collar if they aren't already pressed in half. With the beginning of the filling between the two layers, secure under your narrow zipper foot. Don't worry if the filling is squashed a bit at this stage. While the foot holds it in place, line up the rest of the fill inside the nylon collar. Baste stitch at 1/8 seam allowance all the way to the end, keeping the seam straight. If you use black thread here, you won't have to worry about it being perfect as long as it secures the collar filling. You can also use a sewing magnet to help align the seam. Unfortunately, I lost mine when I was in between studio spaces. For production purposes, chain stitch multiple collars together. Your collar is now complete. Next, we will attach it to the neckline. Line up the collar edge with the center front. Place right sides together and secure underfoot. Drop the needle at 1/8 seam allowance to secure collar to neckline. Controlling the collar with the left hand and neckline with tweezers. Bring top and bottom together as you enter the curve. Here I push the sleeve through the armhole to better position the neck curve. Remember when you sewed the sleeves, you left an 8-inch seam allowance at the top? Now open the shoulder seams to catch it to the collar as you sew. Now sew collar to the back neckline, matching to the bottom neck curve. Keeping seams aligned around the curve, sew straight across the back neckline until you reach the opposite neck curves. Repeat the same sequence of steps as to sew towards the front neckline. Remember to open the shoulder seams as you stitch the neckline curve. Now that you reach the opposite front panel, sew up to the center front and trim off any excess collar length. You're finished! Look at the beautiful collar you just made! Now there is only one more step to go. It is time to attach the center front zipper. Measure the center front panel top to bottom. Here it is roughly 45 to 43 millimeters long, because the length can change slightly depending how the collar is attached. We want to do this manually at first, however, once we can sew the collar consistently, we will eventually skip this step. Now mark your zipper to the same length as the center front, just like you see here. Use your chalk and mark the zipper length. Careful, we don't want the zipper pull to come off of the teeth. Before we sew the zipper to the body, we will need to separate it, like this. The chalk markings ensure proper alignment when we attach the separated zipper to the center front. With the zipper pull below the chalk marks, trim the tape just above the marks, like so. Use a lighter to melt the trimmed edges, preventing further fraying. Now check that the zipper length matches the body length. Note that the tape is placed just above the elastic hem to reduce bulk. Everything looks good. Now let's separate the zipper and attach the storm flap. The storm flap adds a lifelike detail to the puffer jacket and functions as a zipper stop. Place the pull side of the zipper on top of the storm flap, leaving a 1 centimeter difference from the top edge of the storm flap to the zipper tape. Attach the zipper tape to the storm flap at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Stitch until you reach the beginning of the zipper stop and secure by backstitching. Now fold the top over the zipper tape, creating a triangle-shaped tab. Next, secure the tab to the tape. Trim off the excess storm flap just above the zipper pull and put aside for more zippers. Fantastic! Now you are ready for the final step. Place the storm flap zipper to the logo side of center front, just above the elastic channel. Then position underfoot, but leave room for the zipper stop to pass next to the foot when you sew. Backstitch to catch the elastic before sewing straight forward until you reach the top edge. Unfortunately, I forgot to film this step. However, you can learn by watching how I attach the other zipper to center front. Place the zipper tape at the top edge of the collar and just above the elastic channel. And sew at 1/8 inch until to reach the elastic hem. Backstitch over the channel to secure the elastic. Your journey is nearly complete. Turn the seam allowance over and top stitch the center front edge. Because this is on the center front, you'll want to make this as straight and clean as possible. Make sure the elastic tail is folded underneath. Again, place the zipper stop to the side of the foot. Top stitching is a functional detail that highlights the piece's craftsmanship. Sew all the way to the top edge and backstitch to secure. The results of your top stitching should 1. Hide the earlier storm flap basting, 2. Secure the elastic hem, and 3. Leave a visually clean finish. Trim the threads and elastic tail, but remember to leave a few millimeters. Okay, we are nearly finished. Turn over the opposite zipper and top stitch the edge just like you did earlier. Remember to fold the elastic tail underneath and secure using backstitches when you reach the end. Congratulations! You have completed the Labubu Puffer Jacket tutorial. Keep practicing and you will master this piece in no time. Thank you for watching.